Hey, good morning, and thanks for joining this morning's Office Hours webcast. My name is Christian Buckley. I am the Microsoft Regional Director and MVP, and the Microsoft Go-to-Market Director for AvePoint. And this Office Hours broadcast is coming to you every other Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. I think that's right, Ed, 11 a.m.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Already providing value. Look at that. Thank you to our guest here. You can subscribe for future notifications to this show that happens every other Wednesday. If you go to AvePoint or avept.it, I know, almost AvePoint there, /0365 hours. We'll share the link there, of course. But I'm joined this morning by Ed Senez, who's the co-founder and president of tyGraph and a Microsoft partner in ISV. And we've got a great topic. And so, Ed, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Christian. Pleased to be here today and talking about one of my favorite topics, which is analytics. So great, great to be here.
The evolving Microsoft analytics. So I know, I mean, there's always been a lot going on in the space, and I know as an ISV, as a partner, and obviously you've been working on these different various pieces for years, and we go way back through the SharePoint community, and I know that you're working with all of the workloads now. But let's kind of jump right into it. Let's talk about the most recent announcement. So the announcements, of course, of Microsoft Viva and specifically Insights as part of Viva, which is also kind of an expansion of what's been going on with my analytics capabilities. So what's really happening with personal and team analytics inside of Microsoft 365?
Well, I think the direction is really great because currently we kind of have spread data everywhere, and it's really hard for people to understand kind of which signals should I pay attention to, what's important to me, and in the various capacities. One of the most important things about data is it needs to tell a story, it needs to have a purpose, like what business problem are we trying to solve. So I think Insights is something that'll provide focus for that, and it kind of comes right now in three flavors, but two that are really predominant. One is that kind of that My Analytics Insights, and for those who have subscribed to it, they may have seen it in their feed and in email as an example, reminding you that hey, apparently I'm not getting enough sleep. And some of those well-being things, some markers, the ability to coach a person on focus time and things of that nature, right? Looking at people's calendars and saying, how much energy are they spending, in meetings, doing these other various tasks, responding to emails, and in providing some guidance and coaching. all to the lens of really helping the employee from a well-being perspective. So I think Viva really, or Viva Insights specifically, really starts to drive that home, and they're including other things. So they're wrapping in things like Headspace, right? So the kind of a meditation app as part of that. Taking breaks prompts, which apparently I need from time to time.
Well, I was tell people too that I have when I used to run more and but when I go out walking and things, I have my Apple Watch.
Right.
And if for those that have an Apple Watch, they're aware of this. Like you get the vibrator on your wrist, and look down, it says breathe, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
what is this junk that's going on? And one of the things that's happened over the last year and a half, and especially with COVID happening, I've started to pay attention to those things. I'm like, I haven't stood up in a while. I should stand up, walk around. Thankfully, I have a dog, so I go and walk. But having that kind of, data point and being able to report back and look at, what are my unhealthy practices? Because I think the meeting fatigue, screen fatigue, is a real thing for people that didn't think it was a real thing, and then they started working from home like the rest of us, and they realized that having some data and being able to go in and monitor and be more self-aware of your own habits and bad habits of how much time you're sitting and what you're actually doing with your time is important to your long-term health.
And it's they've thrown an even another layer, like a concept of a virtual commute. So I used to have this decompress time for about 20 minutes or so in the car, and by the time you get home, you've kind of divorced yourself a little bit from that workday, even though the portable stress, as I like to call it, your mobile phone continues to to taunt you, if you will, to come back to work on a continual basis. But that those types of things are really, they're using data for good, if you will, really making sure that people are starting to pay attention to these things, because as we transform to this more digital economy, these things become really important. We've seen it with social media and people getting consumed by those platforms. I think Microsoft's taken a very healthy position, if you will, to really get people subscribed and understanding that. So.
Well, that's how I interpreted the Viva announcements in general, is that we have, and there's been an evolution, again going back to kind of our SharePoint roots.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at kind of the evolution of that, SharePoint started off being a very dev-centric and IT pro-centric solution, and then as it got, the technology got better, and we got the broader adoption, we had more end-user topics. Into now, you go to an event when we used to have those, if you remember.
Yeah, the good old days.
You'd have, more than half of the audience would be end users, and power users would be, users of the technology. But we get to a point where we have the broad adoption, where we're not spending our time worrying so much about keeping servers up and running, lights on, kind of that approach.
Just log in now.
And we're understanding the core capabilities and using the capabilities of the solution. While that's still an issue, is a lot of questions that people ask. It's it helps highlight a not a clear understanding of what the out of the box capabilities are. Like, you should master the out of the box before you move on to the advanced capabilities. But now people are starting to ask, and this kind of gets to my point around Viva. We have all these great technologies. Like, what's next? How do we truly transform our business? And we've talked about transformation for years. And yet I think most people that thought of transformation as, well, I'm just swapping out, upgrading the technology. It's like, no, the transformation has less to do with the technology and more to do with, the people process, the business processes, and then changes. So are we getting the most out of the technology and our processes and our people? And doing it in a well-rounded way.
Exactly. And a lot of organizations have kind of gone to this organizational change management, or in the Microsoft sphere, the adoption change management programs. Microsoft has employed hundreds of customer success managers across the globe to really help organizations through those transformational journeys and let them understand. You raise a great point, right? SharePoint, we saw it. Well, I've deployed SharePoint, so it's good. We're done. Right? Yammer, same deal, right? We deployed it, we turned it on, and well, nobody really used it, and Teams was going down that same road, though with Skype dissolving, if you will, and Teams coming in, and the pandemic, certainly the communications channel of Teams, just took off like a rocket, as you would expect, but. So it's no longer just turning it on. It's sitting, it's the side by side with the employees, and understanding what business problems they need to solve, and then structuring your environment around that. And data can really feed those, right? So let's say we run a lunch and learn, and we have information going out to employees. Well, finding out kind of what's happened downstream. Did it affect the telemetry, right? Did people start using the products in the way that we asked them to use it? And if not, do we need to do some course correct? If they are, great. And then we also have, I call it the 12-step program, people that fall off the wagon. So that churn, right? So people, we started using the program, but we decided not to. And being able to identify those earlier in the business cycle really gives a good lens to people that are running those organizational change management, because they can have the interview and really just get down to the root of the problem. We had a great example. A customer was trying to get off of Skype, and what it turned out was it had nothing to do with internal comms. It was the supply chain. The supply chain was still using Skype. So once they discovered what that problem was through the data analytics, they were able to quickly get in there and course correct, and within a very, very short period of time, they managed to shut down Skype about 4 to 5 months earlier than they had predicted, just because they were able to see what was going on organizationally.
Well, that's a great point. Is that so? You've talked about a couple different things. I mean, we have the personal analytics, like what I'm doing with my day, how I'm spending my time.
Right.
You have the the workload specific analytics. You have the team or project analytics. You've got the organizational analytics. You have, and I know that you, as different partners and ISVs that provide solutions out there, and AvePoint has data as well that is able to look at anonymized data across multiple customers and learn things from that as well. But so I'm interested. So we're talking more and more about data. In fact, Microsoft has made this a major shift. I'm trying to remember how long ago it was, 6-7 years ago, where they slowly kind of cleared out the formal, like a lot of the testing functions, and said, well, everybody should be testing to some degree, but they built up around the telemetry and analytics within every product area, every project team. There was somebody that owned the analytics and doing data-driven analysis and development. So there's a lot that's happening that's changing, hence the name, the evolving, Microsoft 365 analytics. But in the ecosystem. So kind of what are the segments? What are the areas of analytics that Microsoft is now formally focusing on? And what should IT pros and managers be focused on?
Sure. Great question. So Viva specifically, so Viva Insights, we talked about personal analytics. Then there's another layer of manager analytics. So think of a roll-up of information to a managerial position, because candidly, employees don't always do what they're supposed to do. And that's why we have managers. Right. So from a well-being perspective, really understanding kind of what's going on with their staff, and being able to coach and monitor. And it's not really, don't think about it as kind of a big brother at a staff level. It's more, departmentally, how are things going? Are we trending in the right direction? More like CSAT scores with customer satisfaction, right? Those types of things that drive programs, and so maybe it's it's reminders, maybe it's let's have a joint session, et cetera, et cetera. So all sorts of things that managers do to move the needle. And then there's kind of this concept of advanced tools. So what they've done is they basically created a platform, if you will, that you can plug other tools into. There was you can use R if you're really a propeller head, like some of our data scientists get into that level of analytics and doing all sorts of different things, but a bunch of pre-baked KPIs and so forth, but really trying to get a better handle on what's going on organizationally is really where it's at. So that I would suggest would be more of the I'll call it outside of IT type of perspective, because really we're talking about kind of that HR lens on the world from an analytics perspective, and I think that's really where Insights is going with the whole announcement and trajectory that they're going down. But having said that, as I mentioned earlier, data everywhere. We also have the kind of the three pillars beyond the product analytics, which you've already mentioned. The other three pillars of analytics in the Microsoft ecosystem. There's what's called the admin center. So if you log in, you are the administrator, you have the admin center, you can go in and see telemetry data on each one of the workloads, kind of how it's going. That's really more of an IT lens. So that would be, an IT pro type of lens. Then there's usage analytics, which is kind of an extract. It's very, call it high level. So pre-aggregated data. Again, giving you some good telemetry on kind of what's going on a workload by workload basis. It does pull in some telemetry around HR information like departments and divisions and so forth, if that's populated accurately in Azure Active Directory, which is a whole thorny topic.
Right. And partner solutions that have been developed just around that area,
just
right?
To solve that problem, right?
Yep.
And then finally, there's the audit logs, right, in the compliance center, where you can prescriptively go in and run a search query and pull back those audit level data extracts and pull that back. And then finally, there's the root of all that, which is the graph, and the graph has a plethora of data in it that you can pull and go and make hay with, if you will, which is candidly what we do. We get at that audit level perspective.
So I want to ask this just because I know that I've seen several of your requests hit, and John, your CTO, John White, who's a fellow MVP, he's commented within the MVP circles on wanting to see an expansion of the API capabilities. And there's always those asks that are out there from partners. And a lot of that, for customers that are wondering about this, that want this visibility is, as ISVs, as providers, AvePoint, tyGraph, they're exactly the same, where we're being asked by our clients, they want certain capabilities that we go and try and do, either if we can't do out of the box, that we try to do within the APIs, within the capabilities, the partner capabilities that Microsoft provides us. But there's constantly a list of asks that are around there. What do you think are what do you feel are the gaps that are still out there from an analytics telemetry standpoint?
I think it's starting to come together a lot more than it has historically. So as you know, Microsoft tended to develop products in the absence of each other historically.
Right. That's a famous, I know, the battling business units of Microsoft.
Right. Would that be a fair statement? So, SharePoint had their analytics and whatnot, and what the graph is kind of that unifying engine. So what's happening now is we now have kind of this common data platform to write things too. So no longer are we putting things into other buckets and repositories. Oh, you have to go to the SharePoint administration console to go get that SharePoint data, and then you et cetera, et cetera. So what we're seeing now is a little bit of more homogenous. I mean, there are all sorts of individual use cases where, boy, we could really make that better. But really that's kind of the what we're seeing. What we're doing is a lot of harmonization across the platforms as well. So even though these signals are coming in, think about Teams, right? So Teams sounds simple until you start unraveling it. So now I've got call data, I've got meeting. If we record this meeting, I've got a meeting recording data that's going into a OneDrive. I've got data around the files that are being shared in Teams. So that's another different vector. Then I've got Teams and channel chat messages and people responding and liking and so forth. So that's another set of data, and all of that persists in kind of different repositories behind the scenes. So that harmonization of that data set is really kind of the vector I think we're traveling down, but we're certainly not down that road yet.
Yeah, there's one of the other kind of areas or gaps. I mean, so going back to like my analytics, and I get those those emails every morning that says here's how you're spending your time, and one of the major gaps, and this is this is a little thing, but I work within multiple tenants. I work across multiple cloud environments, and so it doesn't capture everything. It's great for all the things that I'm doing within my tenant, within my
Yeah.
primary email right there. But like I still have all of my community activities, the MVP things that I participate in. There's calls every week around product announcements and things that are going on, other things that are in between Yammer and Teams and just online that aren't picked up and captured in those analytics. So it often will tell me that I have much more free time to collaborate than I actually like. It didn't feel like I had all that free time.
Yeah, you should see my personal calendar. I'm golden there.
But that's an issue with analytics as well, because increasingly, I mean, how many companies are out there that only work within one OEM, one ecosystem? Like that, we're a Microsoft shop, and that's all we do. If it doesn't have Microsoft involved in it, like we don't touch it, kind of thing. The reality is that whether it's their sales platform, their CRM platform, whether they're working in other ERP platforms, they're part of other networks working across this, and then there's tools. They may be passionate Teams users, but still be running other competing solutions as well. I know it's shocking that happens, but out there, but it's what we don't talk about openly. But so I mean, from an analytics standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. Workplace analytics is an example, which is the other. So there's like kind of that personal my analytics and workplace analytics, which is more the manager analytics. Those are keyed very much on exchange signals. So what they're doing is they're looking at calendar, they're looking at free time, free space in calendar to calibrate that focus time calculations and so forth. And then also, how busy, from a send receive perspective on emails and so forth. It's as good as they can do right now with the tooling that they have. And the other thing to be cautious of, because one of the big topics was this whole productivity score that got a little bit of fanfare.
Right. It's just where I was going to go with my next question anyway. But so maybe let me ask the question. I said,
sure.
Talking about the productivity score.
Absolutely.
There were a lot of concerns from parts of the community or individuals within the community about the data that Microsoft was capturing as part of the productivity score and who actually had access to this. I believe that fundamentally, like the people that were complaining the loudest about that understood it the least.
Yeah.
Like how it was being used. Maybe you could kind of enlighten us of, what it was and what it wasn't.
Yeah. So where Microsoft did a bit of a course correct was around the anonymization component of it, and they have on December 1st, Jared had made a formal announcement that we're going to obfuscate this data. So from a collection perspective, but it's really important for managers to have those signals, right? Like so, if your employees are burning out, we can tell that from the data. It's really important for the manager to understand that and to be able to take action on it. So I don't think Microsoft in any way, shape, or form stepped over the line. And now they've even, with their slight course correct, they've even been more tolerant to those scenarios where people might feel it's a little bit too creepy. But let's talk about the productivity score. It's a good attempt. All of these data signals are just that. They're signals. They're pointers. They're saying, so for example, we do sentiment analysis, right? So we're looking at message signals and so forth, and some customers will come to us and say, well, hey, this message was scored low, but it's really high, or vice versa. And notoriously help desk score super low. So what do they deal with? They deal with problems, right? So that's in the context of their message. But it's more around aggregating the signals and looking for trends and patterns, right? And that's really the important part. These, a productivity score is a direction signal, right? So if I'm looking at an income statement or a balance sheet, I mean, if I go to the financials, right, and I look at expenses as the only form of telemetry around how my organization is doing, I would have a completely different context than looking at, oh, well, look at revenue relative to expenses, either good or bad, right? So it's aggregating these signals and making intelligent business decisions. So what we're seeing with organizations and really the data platforms are really starting to support this, and I think that's why we're starting to hit a real good stride. You look at tools like Power BI and Synapse creating data lakes, Microsoft Synapse or Azure Synapse rather, to create a data lake and put all this data together. I mean, we're creating repositories and areas where we can aggregate and more quickly analyze candidly better than Excel. I mean, great tool, but tools like Power BI lend themselves to bring in all these other data sources. So even ourselves, we're finding that we provide very distinct business problems that people solve around communications, community management, HR, a little bit of IT. So we solve those for those problems, but they're taking these signals and they're solving for other problems in the organization. So when we say productivity score, treat it with a grain of salt, right? I mean, it is productivity in a lens, in a context.
Right.
If I'm really responsive in email, is that good or is that bad, right? Depends on what my job is.
Right. Well, that was like one of the complaints in this scenario. Like if your manager is going in and saying, you were invited or you're part of 57 different chats last week,
Right.
and you only actively participated in 23 of them. Right? Like, is that good or bad?
That person is a bad manager.
Right. But there's the fundamental problem. I think you called it out too, is that it's about trends, is seeing patterns within the data, and it should inform you about what's going on. And I mean, I've had for years, and I've spoken about, written about, and said concerned of managers, people managers who manage by spreadsheet without then having conversations. And I always use it an example. Former organization, operations and support organization, where they looked at the number of tickets closed and judged the value of support personnel by the number of tickets they closed in a month. And so the person that was consistently at the bottom of the list as closing the fewest, usually like 3 or 4 tickets in a month, where the average was 2 or 3 tickets in an hour by comparison. And a manager who was just like, well, we need to, obviously this person needs to go. It's like, wait a second, this person is working on the ugliest problems and is the go-to person with the product team to solve the issues. So from looking at it from the data of your analytics in that myopic view of what you think that means, without fully understanding of what's actually happening, and then using that to inform you to go and find out more about what's going on with this individual. That's the mistake that's made with analytics far too often. And so it should inform, it should help with pattern recognition. But at the end of the day, it's just another data input to be part of your overall decision. It might be the biggest data input to be part of the decision. But it's one indicator.
And a plug for well-run companies out there. What's been interesting through the last year is understanding how people were, the shift in usage data. And this time last year, people were saying, are people working? And it wasn't whether or not they were working. They were genuinely concerned about the welfare of their staff. It was a very interesting. I think the one thing that's happened with all of this is the employees become more human to the corporation, because they're starting to see the kids in the background, and there's a humanity that has evolved from this. So of all the garbage that has gone on in the last year, I think that's one thing corporately that's really interesting. We also got asked around, how are people feeling, right? And, we did some sentiment analysis, keyword analysis, things of that nature. And we're able to kind of derive some signals. And again, correlation isn't causation, but we were seeing things where there was direct impacts, right? The CEO would make a statement, make a message, land that communication out to the digital water cooler, if you will, and see the impact to the organization. So I think, again, it's a signal. It can be used for good or bad, but good managers will do good things, right? And I think empowering people with more data is just going to help them on those journeys.
Well, and I'll put the marketing hat on here for a second too, to understand how your campaign is landing. Great example of the CEO wants to get out to the 10,000 employees in the organization, and going and looking at how, after an announcement went out there or a town hall internally, and going and looking at the metrics and seeing how people are consuming, especially if you there's always good to have like a call to action in any marketing initiative. So if you even internally do the same thing. But to go and look at how many people clicked on this. And so that will then help inform you, like, are we doing a good enough job of getting the word out, even internally? And that will get you thinking about, are we using the right tools? Why is it that overwhelmingly in the same time zone, these two different groups in two different cities, one did better than the other? What's different about that? What's happening within the culture of that office, that location, or not? So you can start to have those discussions, say, what is the best way for our organization that we collaborate, that we communicate, and we share knowledge and information, and so that you can improve upon those things. I'm of that mindset. That's like it's a process of a continual improvement. Of course, we've heard that. Right. As Deming said, we're constantly optimizing that. So look for opportunities. That's what the analytics affords us. It's not the answer to those questions, but it will help you then to go in and refine and improve, iterate and improve, and constantly fine tune those systems.
Yeah, and if you look at the PRO-C methodology for adoption change management, organizational change management, it's all about that, right? It's build, measure, learn. Those types of programs where we're continually taking a look at how are we landing, what's the outcome look like. So
you cannot improve something if you're not measuring it. That's sure.
That's right.
So, yeah. Well, Ed, really appreciate your time today. People want to find out more about you and your company. Where do they go? How do they find you?
Tygraph.com is our destination point. Pleased to talk to anybody who's more interested in data and analytics. Thanks for having me, Christian.
Thanks again for joining me. And again, once for the people that are watching the show, so we're back every other Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. And it's so we're every other week. Starting next month, it'll be the first and third Wednesdays of each month. But of course, you can subscribe if you go to and look for AvePoint out on LinkedIn. And so that's where the primary broadcast is happening. And you can see this, but you can actually get notifications to when all these shows happen. Go and sign up. It's at avept.it WAC 0365 hours. And so just take a look for AvePoint office hours. You'll find us. Well, thanks a lot, Ed. Thanks everybody for watching.
Christian.